The two gods brush past each other by the shoulder along the bridge. He imagines such a scene. One is the blinding light that rises from infinite void, and the other is blackened blood coursing along parched earth. One dons a flaming crown while prostrating, and the other weeping tears of sulfur amidst hymns. This happened 1,000 years ago, the elder he imagines says to the children. Words became flesh. With the scepter's plot in Amphoreus well underway, Herta's getting close to the Pandora Amphora, Maidiamo's suspicious plot points, and Phaenon's imminent crash-out, everything we have learned about Honkai Star Rail's world-building is starting to fit together like a puzzle named Magnum Opus, the great work that is the main theme of all Hoyoverse games since their inception as a game company. But to understand what Magnum Opus is, what every single character in Honkai Star Rail wants to do, we must first go back to the beginning of human history, the start of it all, out of Africa. Disclaimer: this video will talk about historical facts and subjects that could be considered blasphemy if you're a deeply religious follower of the Abrahamic religions. And by Abrahamic religions, I mean all of them. If you're easily offended by discussions about the development of religions and belief systems from a historical standpoint, this video is not for you. As everyone knows, all of humanity came out of Africa, as described by the aptly named Out of Africa theory. However, that doesn't mean that all of us came out of Africa at the same time. Instead, humans migrated from Africa in different waves across the timescale, creating different groups of people speaking different languages in the Middle East, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Among these people, the ones relevant to our discussion for Magnum Opus here are the pre-Indo-Europeans, the Sumerians, the Afroasiatic speakers, the ancient Egyptians. In the modern day, when you speak of European languages, you'd think of languages like English, French, Italian, and Greek. However, it wasn't always the case. Back before the speakers of Indo-European languages, the language family that most modern Europeans speak, arrived at their current location, Old Europe was inhabited by the pre-Indo-European people, a diverse population that wasn't necessarily related to each other and spoke many different non-Indo-European languages. Some notable examples of these pre-Indo-European people are the people at Catalhoyuk, who are popular in the modern day for their funny statues, the Vinca culture, whom I'm sure most of you have heard of in history class, the Basque, whose descendants are still around and famed for their cheesecake, the Cartvellians, whose descendants are also still around and famed for their cheese bread, the Etruscans, who eventually assimilated with the Indo-European Italics to become Romans, and whose myth became the story of Remus and Romulus, and the Cretan Minoans, whose eventually assimilated with the Indo-European Greeks to become modern Greeks and whose cultures and myths heavily contributed to Greek culture. While we don't know much about the pre-Indo-European people, in fact, the Minoan linear A script is still not deciphered. There are quite a bit of artifacts left behind underneath the earth, and myths transmitted through time by their Indo-European speaking descendants, enough for archaeologists and historians to stitch together a rough understanding of their culture and history. For one, the Greek goddess of Eileithyia of childbirth was actually a Minoan goddess of the same name, which made Eileithyia cognate with the Eleusinian mysteries, Elysium, the afterlife of heroes, and Alicia, our pink Yuri Jesus. In Linear B tablets found in Knossos Palace of the Mycenaean civilization, the Indo-European-speaking descendants of the Minoans, Eileithyia remained a major goddess associated with the birth of a divine child and a divine cave where she was worshipped, as also attested by Homer in the Iliad, when Odyssey once sought refuge in Eileithyia's cave from the storm. Much later on, after the Greek Dark Age, the Minoan Mycenaean cult of Eileithyia continued to exist as the Eleusinian mysteries, in which Persephone and Demeter were worshipped as Despoina and Eileithyia, respectively. However, at this time, unlike the depiction of Eileithyia as the goddess preventing the birth of the divine child Apollo or Heracles under the directive of Hera's zealous rage in Homeric hymn and the Iliad, Eileithyia as Demeter in the Eleusinian mysteries stayed truer to her Minoan Mycenaean origin as the great mother goddess of the divine child and was more associated with giving birth to a divine child herself. In the cult, her worshippers gathered every spring to utter these words, "Mighty Potnia bore a strong son." Hence, in Amphoreus, Cyrene stands in a wheat field, as the Demeter Eileithyia of the story in the Eleusinian mysteries. As such, because Eileithyia was associated with caves by the Minoans and was supposed to prevent the birth of Apollo in Greek myth, Amphitryon is an allegory of the cave, and Phaion is obviously the divine child, the anti-Nanook, the strong son, and the Apollo Heracles whose birth she was supposed to either prevent or support. Probably both at the same time, judging by how Phaion is supposed to be the prisoner of Amphitryon, but maybe he will break out in the future with the help of the Astral Express and meme as a piece of Cyrene. It's honestly a toss-up at this point. Speaking of Phaion, the Minoans were known to have practiced ritual sacrifice of ungulates such as bulls and goats. Many artifacts depicting sacrificial bulls and literal golden scapegoats have been dug up from their palaces and tombs. In modern Greek Lesbos, the same tradition from the Minoan era still continued on in the modern day as their bull sacrifice festival. However, if you look closely, you'll see that both those artifacts and rituals look mightily similar to those of the Sumerians. That's because those goats, the Kri-Kri, also known as Agrami goats of Crete, actually originated from the Levant back in the Neolithic period, and the Minoans did, in fact, had a trade relation with the Sumerians and were heavily influenced by the Sumerian culture and myths. For the full list of Sumerian influence on the Minoan civilization, you can check the description for the link to the academic paper. It's a lot, and I can't cover all of them here without spending 3 hours on it. In effect, the golden scapegoat is golden because they really are the original golden scapegoat of Sumerian myth, the dying and rising god of fertility and spring, Dumuzid. As humans migrated out of Africa, they inevitably had to pass through North Africa and Mesopotamia, turning this general area into a hotbed for cultural exchange and urban development, becoming the Urhimat for many different groups of people and their civilizations. The ancient Egyptians are self-explanatory, building their civilizations in northern Africa and famed for their pyramids. They are also very relevant to the discussion here as one of the major sources of the European notion of Magnum Opus, but I'll cover them in another part of the video. While there are many different groups of Afroasiatic-speaking people, the Afroasiatic-speaking people relevant to the discussion of the European Magnum Opus here are the Akkadians, who inherited the Sumerian culture and spread it far and wide to literally everyone else in Mesopotamia, the Chaldea, and the Babylonians, who inherited the Sumerian culture and astrology system that eventually developed into Greek astrology in the classical Greek era, the Phoenicians, who spread Dumuzid the golden scapegoat and Gilgamesh the lion king to the Greeks as Melkart the dying and rising god of the sea, something that I have covered in my previous Mighty Eye video. The Hebrews, who spread the golden scapegoat once more to Europe through the Abrahamic religions, and the Arabs, who once again spread the golden scapegoat and Egyptian color coding system once more to Europe through the development of chemia, as in alchemy and chemistry. Combined with the information about how the golden scapegoat spread through the Indo-European people above, you can kind of see where this is going. At the core of it all the golden scapegoats, all the rising and dying gods, these stories fundamentally all once originated from the first cradle of human civilization, the home of the first cultural hero in recorded history, the country of the noble lords, the land of Sumer. The Sumerians are much less known in the modern day, unless you're a Fate fan. Despite being the inventors of the world's first writing system, the builders of the world's first cities, and the authors of the world's first heroic epic in recorded history, the Sumerian civilization was actually lost to time and forgotten until their tablets and stories were rediscovered by the modern people in 1869, some 3,000 years after the end of their civilization. As a language isolate, the Sumerian language has no known relatives, but through the sheer pull of their cultural power and their massive trade network that once extended from the Minoans in Europe to the Indus Valley in South Asia, the Sumerians exerted massive influences on all of their neighbors in the region, from the Akkadians to the Phoenicians to the Hebrew to the Hittite, and even as far as the Minoans in Greek and the Indus Valley in South Asia. Hence, why everyone in this cultural sphere conducted ritual sacrifice with ungulates, worshipped various goddesses of love as mix and match spies of Inanna the goddess of fertility, worshipped various dying and rising scapegoat god associated with spring and agriculture as mix and match spies of Dumuzid, and venerated dying and rising type of Lion King heroes that are basically various iterations of the Sumerian Gilgamesh. A particular feature of the Sumerian religion was their concept of sacred marriage. In their belief, the coming of spring and the success of agricultural practices are reliant on the golden scapegoat god, Dumuzid, the husband of the goddess of war, lust, and fertility, Inanna, also known as Ishtar in Akkadian. For the sake of a successful harvest, every year, the king, representing Dumuzid, must enter a fertility rite with a sacred prostitute, representing Inanna. This proceeding is called the sacred marriage and a cornerstone of the Sumerian belief. If the king failed to sleep with the priestess, if Dumuzid fails to reunite with Inanna, then calamity would fall, or so the Sumerian believed. Ultimately, this rite originated from the belief in Dumuzid as the cyclical dying and rising god of vegetation and fertility, and in Inanna as the goddess of war and love, as recorded in Inanna's descent into the underworld. From the great heaven the goddess set her mind on the great below. The trouble started when the prideful, wily, and arrogant queen of heaven Inanna craved the power of the underworld, which belonged to her sister, Ereshkigal. Thus, Inanna adorned herself with many pieces of jewelry and descended into the underworld. There, she angered Ereshkigal by mocking the death of Ereshkigal's husband, Gudjalana. As a punishment, Inanna was stripped of her many pieces of jewelry and clothes, and then she was killed, her corpse hung on a peg, ready to be dismembered for Ereshkigal's dinner. However, unknown to Ereshkigal, this was all in accordance with Inanna's plan. She actually planned it all along and had forewarned her minister, Ninkubira, of the script. As a result, after Ereshkigal was killed, Ninkubira proceeded as planned and pleaded with the gods in heaven for the resurrection of Inanna. Unfortunately for Inanna, Enlil and Nanna declined, saying that she had it coming when she craved not only the power of heaven, but also the power of the underworld. It was only Enki, whom Fate fans probably knew of as his Akkadian name, Ea, who agreed to help her. With the dirt on his fingernails, Enki created two servants who would carry the life-giving plant and the life-giving water to the corpse of Inanna in the underworld to resurrect her to life. In the underworld, the servants did as instructed and buttered up Ereshkigal by sympathizing with her pain of childbirth. Mollified, Ereshkigal offered them the food and water of the underworld, but they rejected both and asked for the corpse hanging on the peg, their queen, Inanna. Ereshkigal consented, and Inanna was revived with the life-giving plant and the life-giving water. However, all was not well for Inanna. When she was about to ascend from the underworld, the judges stopped her. Whoever has descended to the underworld has never come out unscathed. If Inanna wants to return from the underworld, she must give us a substitute. But before Inanna returned to her city, the Sumerian poem Dumuzid's dream intersected the descent of Inanna. Dumuzid had a prophetic dream, a dream in which he was killed. Woke up frightened, he rushed to his twin sister, Geshtinanna, and told her, "In my dream, rushes were rising up for me, rushes kept growing for me, a single reed was shaking its head at me, twin reeds. One was being separated from me. Tall trees in the forest were rising up together over me. Water was poured over my holy coals for me. The cover of my holy churn was being removed. My holy drinking cup was torn down from the peg where it hung. My shepherd's stick disappeared from me. An owl took a lamb from the sheep house. A falcon caught a sparrow on the reed fence. My male goats were dragging their dark beards in the dust for me. My rams were scratching the earth with their thick legs for me. The churns were lying on their side. No milk was poured. The drinking cups were lying on their side. Dumuzid was dead. The sheepfold was haunted." Geshtinanna answered Dumuzid, "My brother, your dream is not favorable. Don't tell me any more of it." Dumuzid, "Your dream is not favorable. Don't tell me any more of it. The rushes rising up for you, which kept growing for you, are bandits rising against you from their ambush. The single reed shaking its head at you is your mother who bore you, shaking her head for you. The twin reeds of which one was being separated from you is you and I. One will be separated from you. The tall trees in the forest rising up together over you are the evil men catching you within the walls." That water was poured over your holy coals means the sheepfold will become a house of silence. That the cover of your holy churn was being removed for you means the evil man will bring it inside in his hands. Your holy drinking cup being torn down from the peg where it hung is you falling off the lap of the mother who bore you. That your shepherd's stick disappeared from you means the demons will set fire to it. The owl taking a lamb from the sheep house is the evil man who will hit you on the cheek. The falcon catching a sparrow on the reed fence is the big demon coming down from the sheep house. That the churns were lying on their sides, no milk was poured, the drinking cups were lying on their sides, that Dumuzid was dead, and the sheepfold haunted, means your hands will be bound in handcuffs, your arms will be bound in fetters. That your male goats were dragging their dark beards in the dust for you means that my hair will whirl around in the air like a hurricane for you. That your rams were scratching the earth with their thick legs for you means that I shall lacerate my cheeks with my fingernails for you, as if with a boxwood needle. It was then that the demons came for Dumuzid. In Dumuzid's dream, they tortured Geshtinanna, who continually refused to disclose her brother's location. However, a friend of Dumuzid was bribed with a river of water and a field of grain, and so Dumuzid was caught in the ditch of Arali. In the mortal world of Inanna's descent, Inanna returned to her city, flanked by the judges of the Underworld, who urged her to pick a person to be her substitute as soon as possible. But Inanna continually refused to do so to every person she met, until she ran into her husband in the great apple tree in the plain of Kalaba, the city of Uruk. There was Dumuzid clothed in a magnificent garment and seated magnificently on a throne. The demons seized him there by his thighs. The 7 of them poured the milk from his churns. In other words, he was not mourning Inanna at all, and this pissed her off greatly. She looked at him. It was the look of death. She spoke to him. It was the speech of anger. She shouted at him. It was the shout of heavy guilt. How much longer? Take him away. Holy Inanna gave Dumuzid the shepherd into their hands. Predictably, Dumuzid let out a wail and turned very pale. The lad raised his hands to heaven, to the sun god Utu. He asked the sun god to turn him into a serpent or a gazelle, depending on the version, so that he could escape death. Moved by Dumuzid's tears, Utu accepted his plea and did turn him into a serpent, but Dumuzid was captured anyway and dragged into the underworld as Inanna's literal scapegoat. Without Dumuzid, the vegetation started to wilt, spring ended, and the merciless summer of Mesopotamia arrived. The flawless youth Dumuzid died in the month of Tammuz, which is the 7th month in the Arabic calendar, signaling the change of season and the end of the fertile spring. By the way, Phaenon's banner in 3.4 would begin on the 1st and 2nd day of July, right on the dot. In Mesopotamia and beyond, people, especially women, mourned for his death. In Phoenicia, Dumuzid, as Inanna's fisher king, was worshipped as Tammuz Melkart together with his wife, Astarte, the Phoenician version of Inanna-Ishtar. Continuing the Sumerian tradition of Dumuzid as the fisher king, Melkart became the dying and rising fishing god of the sea in Phoenicia, his statue thrown into the sea, only to be fished up and sacrificed in the fire, the sacrificial scapegoat as a prayer for next year's good harvest. In Athens, Dumuzid, as Phaeon, or Phaeton, or Adonis, depending on the version, died in the arms of the Greek ex-spy of Inanna, Aphrodite, leaving behind a weeping goddess who cried tears of flowers for him. Every year, the festival of Adonia would commence, and women would plan short-lived gardens of Adonis and offer cakes to Aphrodite to mourn for him. In Ugarit, Baal, having been syncretized with Dumuzid among the Canaanites and became the husband of Asherah, was known as a youthful god with 4 wings and the god of fertility. As the healer god, Baal heals wings of birds and brings back life. Like Dumuzid, every year, he died only to rise again every year, marking the cycle of the seasons with his perpetual life and death. In the southern Levant, among the Canaanite tribes, a new warrior god called Yahweh rose from an epithet of El, the main rival of Baal in the Baal cycle, and was paired with Asherah as his consort. Yet, as the worship of Yahweh steadily became monotheistic over time, Yahweh gradually absorbed the entire Levantine pantheon into his domain, with the dying and rising god Storm Baal and his wife the goddess Asherah became the targets of polemic attacks by the writers of the Hebrew Bible. Slowly, over the course of centuries, from the wife of Yahweh, Asherah was demonized as wickedness, the whore of Babylon, her domain of childbirth taken away from her. From a healer and a dying and rising fertility god, Baal was demonized as a false god, shame, and the lord of the flies. At the end, when the monotheistic process had completed, Asherah became nothing more than the name of a demon, and Baal became nothing more than yet another epithet of Yahweh. This development was reflected in Genshin, where the god of thunder Baal was absorbed by the warrior god Ai after her death. With the supplant of Baal's identity, the people of Inazuma could only remember Ai and believe her to be Baal all along. In Jerusalem, in the time when Jeremiah was written, the children gather wood, the fathers light the fire, and the women knead the dough and make cakes to offer to the Queen of Heaven. They pour out drink offerings to other gods, which evidently angered the author by a lot. The other gods they were talking about here are, of course, the Queen of Heaven Inanna and the golden scapegoat Dumuzid, the character whose name from Damu to Dumuzid to Tammuz had become the name of the month, Tammuz. In the Ionian Sea, during the reign of Tiberius, the half-goat fertility god Pan died once more in the month of Tammuz. A divine voice hailed the sailor Themis across the salt water. "Themis, are you there? When you reach Ploutos, take care to proclaim that the great god Pan is dead." In the Islamic world, despite the passage of time and the change in religious belief, during Eid al-Adha, people conduct ritual sacrifice of ungulates and make sheep cakes to celebrate the death of the Ram of Heaven, the golden scapegoat killed by Abraham. In the Christian world, despite the passage of time and the change in religious belief, during Good Friday, people mourn for the dying and rising god that absorbed Dumuzid's domain, the sacrifice of the Lamb, the death of Jesus Christ, awaiting for the day where he would rise again on Easter. In the 20th century, amidst the ruins of World War I in Europe, inspired by Fraser's Golden Bough, which was the very first work to do comparative analysis and put together the idea of a dying and rising scapegoat, Dumuzid, being transmitted across cultures and time, the writer T.S. Eliot had finished his poem titled The Wasteland. In his poem, the war-torn Europe is compared to the broken relationship between Inanna and Dumuzid, as their sacred marriage broke down through the many different characters in the poem. The hyacinth girl drowned in the water as Ophelia, Cleopatra sat alone, the river was polluted with corpses, and Carthage burnt. As the shrinking Sibyl hung in the amphora, the narrator became the blind prophet Tiresias, desperately trying to guide the broken people back to spring. And in the midst of it all was the Fisher King, the European version of the drowning Tammuz, the little fisherman of Inanna, whose wounds could never heal, signaling the death of the wasteland. Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep sea swell, and the prophet and loss, a current undersea, picked his bones in whispers. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool, Gentile or Jew. O you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. In the Sumerian poem In the Desert by the Early Grass, as Damu, he has eyes but he cannot see. He has a mouth but he cannot converse. His mother and sister mourned for him and tried to resurrect him, but he realized that he had already died and could not return. He says he is not in the grass which will grow for his mother again, nor in the waters which will rise. His mother blesses him, addressing her blessing toward the foundations of heaven, toward the foundations of earth. In the end, his sister died and joined him. She told him, "The day that dawns for you will also dawn for me. The day you see, I shall also see," implying that she would trade place with him every day. When he is dawn in the mortal world, she will be the night of the underworld, and when he is the night of the underworld, she will be dawn. In Sumerian poem Gilgamesh, Enkidu and the underworld and the Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, taking on the role of Dumuzid, the gazelle Enkidu fought with Lion King Gilgamesh in front the marital chamber for many days and nights, gaining Gilgamesh's eternal friendship in which they frequently kissed each other on the lips, becoming the Lion King's destined star and acts in their own sacred marriage, the fertility rite that every king must conducted to ensure the good harvest of next year. But like the love of Ishtar's youth, the golden scapegoat Dumuzid, Enkidu, too, died as a scapegoat to Gilgamesh, arrogance against the god. When Ishtar proposed the sacred marriage to Gilgamesh, he refused the proposal of Ishtar, citing the ill fate of Dumuzid, the lover of Ishtar's youth, who turned into a bird because of her. This greatly angered Ishtar, who lobbied for the gazelle Enkidu to be punished for the Lion King Gilgamesh's hubris, just as Dumuzid had been the scapegoat for the mistress of lions herself in Inanna's descent in the underworld. Enkidu dreamt a long dream. In his dream, he saw the council of heaven and his own death. In the Council of Heaven, the gods had decided that Enkidu would die for Gilgamesh's arrogance against the gods. Just as Dumuzid died his scapegoat death to pay for Ishtar's arrogance, Enkidu laid wasting away on his deathbed, desperately trying to come to terms with his mortality. When he cursed Shamash, the sun god reminded him that Gilgamesh would let his body bear a filthy mat of hair, will don the skin of a lion and roam the wilderness. As soon as Enkidu heard the words of valiant Shamash, his agitated heart grew calm, his anger abated. On the 12th day, Enkidu's illness grew ever worse. Enkidu drew up from his bed and called out to Gilgamesh, "My friend hates me." While he talked with me in Uruk, as I was afraid of the battle, he encouraged me, "My friend who saved me in battle has now abandoned me. I and you." And then he died. Just as day began to dawn, Gilgamesh addressed his friend, saying, "Enkidu, your mother, the gazelle, and your father, the wild donkey, engendered you, for wild asses raised you on their milk, and the herds taught you all the grazing lands. May the roads of Enkidu to the cedar forest mourn you, and not fall silent night or day. Now what is this sleep which has seized you? You have turned dark and do not hear me." But Enkidu's eyes do not move. He touched his heart, but it beat no longer. He covered his friend's face like a bride, swooping down over him like an eagle, and like a lioness deprived of her cubs, he keeps pacing to and fro. He shears off his curls and heaps them onto the ground, ripping off his finery and casting it away as an abomination. Gilgamesh clings to Enkidu's body and denies that he has died until a maggot drops from the nose of the corpse. "You, goldsmith, you, jeweler, create my friend. Fashion a statue of him." He fashioned a statue of his friend. His features: your chest will be of lapis lazuli, your skin will be of gold. Finally, at the end of Tablet 8, Enkidu was buried in a riverbed, just as Gilgamesh would be buried in a riverbed after his death, just as the Phoenician Phlebas Melkart statue was buried in the sea, awaiting his resurrection. It is here that the Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh diverted significantly in theme from the Sumerian poems. If Enkidu, in the role of Dumuzid, was successfully returned from the underworld by Gilgamesh with the help of the sun god Shamash in the Sumerian poem, Enkidu in the Babylonian version just died for real, and the subsequent journey into the underworld of Gilgamesh to resurrect him and find the herb of immortality was not successful. Like Gilgamesh, the first Lion King in recorded human history, and his antelope friend, both Achilles and Heracles were compared with lions multiple times in their myths, and oftentimes, this is in contrast to their special friend, who plays the role of the hunted to their lion hunter. For Gilgamesh, he is the Lion King hunter to the antelope Enkidu the hunted. For Achilles and Heracles, their cubs are Patroclus and Hylas, the hunted of their respective Lion Kings. And of course, this setup of their special relationship that kisses each other and grappled with each other in front of the marital chamber entrance, a fight that lasted several days and several nights between the Lion King the hunter and the antelope the hunted, is also preserved in Mighty Eye and Phaenon's relationship, as seen in the official BL audio drama in 3.1. And of course, the parallel of the hunted and the hunter especially shines when it was time for their companion to die. Gilgamesh tearing off his clothes and pacing to and fro like a lioness without its cub, holding the antelope Enkidu's body until maggots dropped out of the corpse. Achilles sobbed loudly, like a lion whose cubs had been stolen away by some deer-hunting man. He refused to bury Patroclus until Patroclus appeared before him in his dream to berate him. As Enkidu was buried in the riverbed, Hylas, the phlebas of Heracles, met his death in the black water. The fawn cried in the hills, leaving Heracles as a ravening lion pacing to and fro. So endless was his wandering by the woods. My friend, Enkidu, whom I love so deeply, for 6 days and 7 nights I wept for him. My friend, Enkidu, whom I love so deeply, has turned to clay. Shall I not be like him and also lie down, never to rise again, through all eternity? After Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh left Uruk. Like Heracles after him, Gilgamesh cried bitterly and wandered in the wilderness, wearing the skin of lions as he grieved for Enkidu and feared his own death. Like Inanna and her journey to resurrect the scapegoat Dumuzid, Gilgamesh decided to go to the underworld and seek the secret of immortality for himself, and, if we take into account the Sumerian poem Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the netherworld, for Enkidu too. Like Heracles traveling in the cup boat of Helios, Gilgamesh traveled the path of the sun Shamash to reach the underworld. So what I'm saying is that we're totally gonna mourn for Phainon in the 7th month Tammuz in 3.4. Just as Achilles, lion hero, mourned for Patroclus, Heracles, the lion hero, mourned for Hylas, Gilgamesh, the lion king, mourned for Enkidu, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, mourned for Phaeon. At the end of the story, Inanna, the lion goddess of war and love, mourned for Dumuzid. Despite being the culprit of the story with her divine hubris, despite scapegoating her husband for her own crimes, despite her anger at him for not mourning her death, when everything was said and done, the goddess Inanna wept bitterly for her husband. She tore at her hair like esparto grass. She ripped it out like esparto grass. You wives who lie in your men's embrace, where is my precious husband? You children who lie in your men's embrace, where is my precious child? Where is my man? Where? It was then that a fly answered her and showed her the solution. Weeping, Inanna arrived in the underworld once more and made a deal with Ereshkigal. Dumuzid's twin sister, Geshtinanna, would be Dumuzid's substitute. For half a year, in the months of withering and death, from midsummer to the end of winter, Dumuzid would stay in the underworld with Ereshkigal, and Geshtinanna would be in the mortal world with Inanna. From the other half a year, in the months of vegetations and fertility, from spring to midsummer, Dumuzid would stay in the mortal world with Inanna, and Geshtinanna would be in the underworld with Ereshkigal. Thus, Dumuzid became the dying and rising god, dying every Tammuz and thrown into the sea as the scapegoat for Inanna, only to rise every spring and enter the sacred marriage with Inanna once more, sharing the role with his twin sister, Geshtinanna, as the gods of the cycles. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks. In Greece, Inanna's descent, her sacred marriage to Dumuzid, and their parallel in Gilgamesh and Enkidu were imported multiple times as Aphrodite and Adonis, Heracles and Hylas, Achilles and Patroclus. In the same way, the middle part of Inanna's descent from Dumuzid's point of view, Dumuzid's dream and the poem of Damu with his mother and sister, was imported to the Greek religion in its own belief package separate from Aphrodite and Adonis. This package is called the Eleusinian Mysteries, a continuation of the Minoan worship of Eileithyia, albeit one remixed with Near Eastern influence from Damu's story. In the Eleusinian Mysteries, instead of focusing on the male child Dumuzid, the cult revolved around Demeter and Persephone, the Greek remix of Demeter and Geshtinanna respectively, both of whom were considered as different aspects of the goddess of childbirth Eileithyia. The male child Dumuzid is actually still there, just sidelined to be the infant Ploutos, the god of wealth born from Demeter on Crete, frequently depicted as being carried in the arms of Eirene, the goddess of peace. In this specific depiction with Ploutos, Eirene is identified with the agricultural goddess Demeter and conflated with Eileithyia's role in the Minoan religion as the mother of the divine child. Note that Ploutos here is not to be confused with the Roman Pluto, the husband of Persephone. While the Sumerian story has Damu, the male child, falling into the underworld first and his mother and sister trying to rescue him, in the Eleusinian mysteries, it was the female child Persephone who fell into the underworld. Just as the Sumerian mother-daughter grieved for her male child Damu and caused the loss of crops, Demeter also grieved for her female child Persephone and caused the loss of crops. At the end of the story, as Damu and Geshtinanna switched place every 6 months to create the seasonal cycle in the Sumerian stories, in the Eleusinian mysteries, the male child of Demeter was sidelined and Geshtinanna's equivalents, Persephone, took on Damu's role. She was to stay half a year in the underworld with Hades, half in the mortal world with her mother Demeter, creating the seasonal cycle with her death and rebirth every year. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to modern-day China. In Amphireus, the twins of the underworld, Dumuzid and Geshtinanna were reinterpreted as 2 separate pairs of characters. In 3.2, Polyxia and Castorice were Geshtinanna and Dumuzid respectively, with the MC as the Inanna of the story. We, as the foreigner, stormed our way into the urn called Amphira, disturbing the cycles of the underworld. As punishment, our future was stolen, and we died, just as Inanna died in the underworld. And just as Inanna must find a substitute in Dumuzid for the MC to return to the mortal world, the Dumuzid Castorice must stay behind. And yet, before the story began, for Castorice to have lived, her own twin, Polyxia, must play the role of Geshtinanna and stay behind in the underworld for the Dumuzid Castorice to live, splitting the role of Thanatos into 2, reflecting 2 different aspects of Eileithyia in the Eleusinian mysteries. But outside of the current cycle, it is also obvious to see that Cyrene and Phaeon are another pair of Geshtinanna and Dumuzid with their roles, albeit Cyrene is not just Geshtinanna. She is obviously Eileithyia, containing both the mother Eirene Demeter and the female child Persephone in the Eleusinian mysteries, while Phaeon is now Ploutos, the child of wealth in the underworld, and the Damu Dumuzid of the most bitter cry. In the underworld, he has eyes, but he cannot see. He has a mouth, but he cannot converse. The sinner traveler swallows the faint light behind bars, the prison's so dark he can't see past his own hand. He doesn't remember who locked him up here. A trail of black ants crawls past his black garb in darkness. The lamb's skull murmurs to itself, "If we had fangs and claws, you wouldn't be locked in here now." Enough, he musters in a moldered voice from the depths of his corroded throat. The sky is but an abyss darker than a prison. You and I are nothing more than slaves to a distant dream. As the mother Dutter and the sister Geshtinanna mourned for Damu, Eileithyia as Eirene Dutter and Persephone Geshtinanna fell into the underworld herself, becoming the substitute for her brother child Damu Phainon, turning into a dying and rising god of spring in her own Eleusinian mysteries. And of course, just as we were Inanna in the 3.2 plot to Dumuzid Castorice and Geshtinanna Polyxia as the ones holding the pens in the wider story of Amphireus, we are Orpheus of the Eleusinian mysteries, venturing to the underworld to resurrect our wife Eurydice again from her ice-cold slumber. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to modern-day China. In Amphireus, the same story of Inanna and Dumuzid, of Damu and Geshtinanna were retold once more. Yet, it is here that all those ancient variations of the tales were remixed once more to create the new characters of the modern world. In Mesopotamia, where the Macedonia general Seleucus Nikador founded the Greek Seleucid Empire after the death of Alexander the Great, a new cult was born, interweaving the Greek Aphrodite once more with her origin, the Sumerian goddess Inanna Ishtar, and with the Macedonian general's idealized god, the victorious conqueror Alexander the Great. The new goddess was not only one of love and marriage, but also was one of wars, of victories, of the final triumph of Alexander the Great. Her name was Nikephoros, the bringer of strife, the bringer of victory. Now you know why my Deimos is the heir of strife. The heir of Nikador is a big reference to Alexander the Great with his friends and teachers' names, has the exact same iconography with Aphrodite in his meme book story, because Nikador is supposed to be Inanna, Aphrodite, Nikephoros all along. And in Amphireus, Willy Inanna, arrogant Inanna, Lion Queen Inanna, merged once more with her Sumerian parallel, the Lion King Gilgamesh, with the Phoenician Lion King Melkart Tammuz, with the Greek lion hero Heracles, with the Greek Aphrodite, with the Seleucid Nikephoros, the triumph of Alexander the Great, the bringer of strife and victory, to once again give birth to the blind lion Nikador, the titan of strife. As Inanna descended into the underworld and died there for her arrogance and hubris, so too did strife, as attested in the Titan Ode's giant's nemesis, the golden scapegoat's murmuring, and the Styxia's nymph quest. The two gods brush past each other by the shoulder along the bridge. He imagines such a scene. One is the blinding light that rises from infinite void, and the other is blackened blood coursing along parched earth. One dons a flaming crown while prostrating, and the other weeping tears of sulfur amidst hymns. This happened 1,000 years ago, the elder he imagines says to the children. Words became flesh. Light and strife is indeed the great evil that he brought unto this world. Of course, the blinding light here is Phainon, whose name is etymologically cognate with Phaeon, Phaeton, fans, all of which have meanings related to light. As the original Kephael with white hair and blue eyes, Phainon is the blinding light that rises from infinite void, donning a flaming crown while prostrating. Of course, since Phainon is the flame reaver Prometheus mentioned in Avilius Messages, his blood would be gold and cannot actually be the blackened blood of the second god, who is obviously strife, Nikador, as Nikephoros Aphrodite, Inanna descending into the underworld in an amphora. Blackened blood coursing along parched earth, the original Nikador fell face first in the River of Souls, as attested in both the Titan Ode's Giant's Nemesis, which recorded the events from Phaenon's point of view, and Mighty Eye's trailer, which recorded the events from my Deimos' point of view. There, he fought against the souls of the dead and the black tide monsters, eventually gaining his victory by stealing Aquila's weapon, turning it into his lance of fury. Of course, as he was originally not from Amphireus, his blackened blood was forced out literally, turning into red crystals, his body shattered, his blood replaced by the golden blood of Amphireus. With strife rampaging the simulation, Kephael was, of course, disturbed and sought help from Aquila and Circe, the latter of whom suggested that Kephael trick Nikador into striking their own shield with their own spear. Thus, the giant journeyed to the River of Souls to confront its sworn enemy. They spoke with carefully chosen words, goading Nikador into action. Proud of their unmatched strength and divine weapons, Nikador listened with scorn. Gripping their spear in one hand and shield in the other, they summoned all their might and clashed them together. A thunderous roar split the heavens. The earth trembled as if struck by divine wrath, quaking for what felt like an eternity before settling into silence. As the dust cleared, the spear remained unscathed, but the shield had shattered into countless fragments. Thus, the giant had finally stripped its foe of one deadly weapon. Weeping tears of sulfur amidst the hymns, Nikador, as Inanna in the underworld, was punished for his crime of hubris with death and dismemberment. But that was all. Their struggle would not end here. It would carry on, stretching into the days yet to come. As Amphireus Inanna died once more in 3.2, the second half of Inanna's descent set into motion. Now, as the month of Tammuz draws near, the cycle has arrived at the twilight of the gods. It is time for Dumuzid to die and be dismembered as the golden scapegoat for Inanna's hubris, for the sun is set to die, as the Styxia nymph quest tablet has told us. To open the gates of the past, one must first abide by the sacrificial rite. The eyeless lion questions, "What is the limit of everything in the world?" The wise at the banquet replies, "The human soul." And so he curled up at the altar, hugging his knees with a high window over his head. He stared at the lion's sharp fangs and offered his soul. The first to disappear were his hands that worked tirelessly, then his legs that measured the earth, until his torso that had held his body together shattered. His head continued to murmur, "Too many people die too late, yet some die too soon." The Lamb says that death is a major affair as worthy of import as the most grandiose festival. Festivals won't just happen once, but death cannot be rewound. But you have already stepped on the altar countless times. I am the assistant priest killer after all, so I know it well. That wasn't me. Seriously, it wasn't. Don't pretend to be so relaxed. You're right. To deliver the firelight, we sinners killed ourselves every time. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to modern-day China. In Amphireus, Inanna's golden scapegoat Dumuzid merged once more with Gilgamesh's Enkidu, with Astarte's Melkart Tammuz, with Ashur's Baal, with Heracles' Hylas, with Aphrodite's Phaeon, with the great god Pan, with the wasteland's Fisher King, to once again give birth to the golden scapegoat Kephael, the titan of world-bearing, meant to be dismembered and die for love. And when the golden fleece Dumuzid returns to his dreams of being a shepherd in the month of Tammuz, the clock will turn back. Aphrodite Nikephoros will leave behind the final beauty once more, and the new cycle will begin anew again. The hour hand greets the minute hand's 13th return, just as it did the first time. The sinner cannot tell beginning and end apart. Yesterday, I was going to tend to the flock in the sky, blanketed by white clouds, where my lambs would only be revealed when gales billowed. Tomorrow, I will have etched fire to the slate, tempered shattered shackles with it, and forged crowns of triumph for heroes. And today, I will never lose my own core flame. The dead have not passed, just as the living are yet to be born. And so, with the death of Dumuzid, Inanna will return once more, and the cycle will begin anew again, stuck in its very own eternal return. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to 20th century Europe. There, the poet fell into despair over the broken land and rivers of corpses after a devastating war. In his poem, he compared his homeland to that of Inanna and Dumuzid's broken marriage, bitterly in love, yet unable to heal from the Fisher King's wound. The Phoenician Phlebas drowned, and the sacred rite of fertility was forgotten in the dark river once more. And so, with the death of Dumuzid, Inanna will return once more, and the cycle will begin anew again, stuck in its very own eternal return. In the Abrahamic religions, the Song of Solomon preserved the rite of sacred marriage between Inanna and Dumuzid, as Yahweh and his consort Astarte in the poem. While the historical interpretation of the song as the love of the Abrahamic God for his followers, recent development and excavation has demonstrated that the love song ultimately originated from the Sumerian fertility ritual between Dumuzid and Inanna, which actually makes total sense because once upon a time, Dumuzid and Inanna went under Baal and Astarte among the Canaanites. As the Abrahamic religions developed and became monotheistic, Baal was absorbed by Yahweh as an epithet, the single god of the pantheon, while Inanna, as Astarte, was written out entirely by later people and subsequently demonized as Astaroth, who appeared as Ishtaroth in Genshin, turning the sacred marriage between a god and his literal canonical wife in the original Sumerian myth into a metaphorical one between a god and the old men heading his religious organizations. Just as well that the lovers in the Song of Solomon were unmarried. Interestingly, Gnosticism kept both Dumuzid as Jesus Christ and Inanna, Yahweh's wife once upon a time, as Sophia, the goddess of light and wisdom. In most Gnostic sex beliefs, Jesus Christ was the true savior and syzygy of Sophia, while Yahweh, as the demiurge, is either the misguided child of Sophia or the false god preventing Sophia from reaching enlightenment. The Gnostic followers believed that when Jesus found Sophia again, they would undergo the sacred marriage, now under the new name of chimical marriage, to turn the sinful mortal world into light, alleviating the sins of the flesh from all humans. For fans of Gun Girlsy, you have probably noticed that this is the exact plot of the relationship between Kiana and May. As the storm god Baal syncretized with Dumuzid, May became the dying and rising god in a strange sacred marriage with the sinful Sophia of the story, Kiana. Locked in an eternal samsara, the Baal Dumuzid as May and Inanna Sophia as Kiana must fix their strained sacred marriage, find each other again across space and time, and conduct the fertility rite once more to bring light to the world, freeing humanity from the eternal cycle. On Yahweh's part, he became the savior of light, holding the stigmata of both May and Kiana, so that part of the historical conflict between Baal and Yahweh in the ancient Levant made its way into Hoyoverse writing too. You can also see the same historical event being referenced in iStory Quest, where the goddess of thunder Baal's identity was supplanted by the warrior god Eye in the public's eyes, and it was her consort, Ishtaroth, who once again resurrected her with the tree, allowing Baal to rise once more as the goddess of spring and the renewal of life. While Gnosticism itself was branded as heresy and eventually stamped out by Christianity and Islam in the Middle Ages, its remnants still influenced how European occultism developed. Organizations and people such as Hermes Trismegistus, which was referenced by Mona and Genshin, the Rose Cross Order, which was referenced by Argeni and Honkai Star Rail, Aleister Crowley's Thelema, which was referenced by Thelema in Honkai Impact 3, Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy, which was referenced by the Samsara in Genshin, the Golden Dawn, which supplied the precursors to the most popular version of the tarot card reading today. All of these organizations and people, in an effort to uncover the dead gods buried by time and history, had looked beyond the mainstream narrative for guidance from the Gnostic beliefs, from the ancient Romans, from the ancient Greeks, from the Sumerians, and from ancient Egyptians. And with that romantic view of history, they had accidentally rediscovered the old religious beliefs of the past, the sacred marriage between the golden scapegoat and the goddess of war and love, the Magnum Opus of Isis and Osiris. As the younger neighbor of Sumer by half a millennium, ancient Egypt had a high level of trade and cultural relations with the Sumerian civilization, which can be seen in the visual arts, in architecture, in technology, weaponry, in imported products, religious imagery, in agriculture and livestock, in genetic input, and also in the likely transfer of writing from Mesopotamia to Egypt. As a result, since the time of the Gurza culture, ancient Egypt has been influenced by the older neighbor and trade partner. Naturally, there are many parallels in the myths of ancient Egypt and Sumer, one notable story of which is the parallel between Inanna and Isis. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to ancient Egypt. In the story of Inanna, she ventured into the underworld and was killed for her hubris, her corpse almost dismembered by Ereshkigal before she was resurrected and escaped to the mortal world. But to return back to life, Inanna must find a substitute for her punishment, and so Dumuzid, her husband, was imprisoned in the underworld instead. Mourning for him, Inanna managed to find another substitute for Dumuzid, his twin sister Geshtinanna, turning Dumuzid into a dying and rising god of spring. In ancient Egypt, Isis was the queen of heaven and the wife of Osiris. Like the rivalry between El and Baal in the Baal cycle, Set was the rival of Osiris for the throne of Egypt and murdered Osiris, dismembering him into many pieces, a punishment that was almost enacted on Inanna by her rival Ereshkigal. Dismembered into many pieces, Osiris was scattered all across Egypt, just as the golden scapegoat Phaeon was dismembered and buried in the four corners of the world. Mourning her husband, in the role of the regretful Inanna, Isis wept, becoming the annual flooding of the Nile, transforming her husband into a god of the annual cycle, the Dumuzid of the ancient Egypt pantheon. Just as Inanna sought to resurrect Dumuzid, to resurrect her husband, Isis sewed his bodies back again and resurrected him as the first mummy, the ruler of the underworld, just as Dumuzid became the ruler of the underworld Nergal in Mesopotamia. However, as the package of the dying and rising god was re-imported to Europe through ancient Egyptian text, esoteric Jewish mysticism, and Arabic alchemy, an additional layer of Egyptian alchemical color meaning was added to the sacred marriage. In ancient Egypt, black is called Kemet, the black silt of the Nile, the color of agriculture and life, and the black land of the Nile River basin. This is one of the two possible origins of the word chemia, from which we have alchemy and chemistry in English. In European alchemy, the color black was considered the first stage of alchemical process, nigredo, in which the materials are burnt or decomposed to become ashes, cleansing the material from all impurities. In Genshin, nigredo is the first step in alchemy, drawing from primordial forms. As beings who live in this world, we must find our own meaning. Arguably, this is the true nature of the abyss creatures. If black is the color of agriculture, the white is the color of white chalk, of purity and the sacred. It is also the color of transcendence, connected with the divine, through which the white crown of Upper Egypt exerted their authorities. In European alchemy, white was the second stage of alchemical process, albedo, in which the uniformed mass of nigredo can be divided into two pure opposing principles. In Genshin, albedo is the step in which change begins, clearing away the excess so we can take on all the knowledge that is available. Would you like to investigate this world with me? The third step is Deshrer, or as Genshin players would be more familiar with, Deshret, the red blood of Isis, representing authority and long life. At the same time, red is also the color of the sun, of the Eye of Ra, and of the red crown of Lower Egypt. In European alchemy, there is actually a debate as to which color is the third stage, red or gold, a debate that was reflected in René's Note versus Gold's belief. For those who believe red to be the final stage, as the color of eternal life, red is the philosopher's stone that was supposed to reunite the two halves of the soul, grant immortality, and resurrect the dead. In Honkai Star Rail, this is the outcome of Castorice's ritual. As a reference to Hermetism, she chanted, "As above, so below," which was a paraphrase of the first line of Inanna's descent. From the great heaven, Inanna set her mind on the great below. As the sacred marriage ritual started, Geshtinanna Persephone Castorice used a literal philosopher's stone made by Anaxa to resurrect her sister Damu and conduct her own sacred marriage with the MC, completing Anaxa's Magnum Opus in his stead. In Genshin, Deshret's failed Magnum Opus led to the abyss infection of Sumeru, and René failed to reassemble his soul as the Narcissenkreuz, which is actually a reference to Christian Rosenkreuz, the legendary founder of Argenti's Order of the Rose Cross. According to Albedo, who actually succeeded in creating a new life from the festering red of Durin by turning it gold, rubido in alchemy refers to the refining of feeling. I feel the refining of my own emotions is also thanks to you. The final stage is gold, as in the golden apple of the Garden of Hesperides, the Rhine gold of Rhine-daughter, and the golden blood of the gods. In ancient Egypt, gold is the flesh and bones of the gods. It is the indestructible and eternal yellow sun, and of Isis' skin, as she sewed back Osiris. In European alchemy, it is the solar light of the soul after purification and reunification, turning lead into gold, completing the eternal cycle of the Ouroboros, as ascending into the divine. In Honkai Star Rail, gold is the water of the imaginary river, where all the wealth of the universe gathers under the foot of the cast iron throne. At the same time, gold is also the golden blood of the Chrysos heirs, stolen by the flame reaver Phaeon from the gods, the golden blood of the black sun, burning the golden scapegoat Nanook as they ascended, the golden tears of Nikador, weeping as his red blood was immortalized into gold. It is the golden apple of the Garden of Hesperides, sowing chaos and writing romance, the Rhine gold of the Rhine daughters, completing the magnum opus of a people wishing to change fate. According to Albedo, Citronides is the final stage of the alchemical transmutation process. The meaning of the object being transmuted has finally been brought to light, becoming gold, and revealing its true value. I too have found my own meaning. Even after Sumer was long gone from people's memories, its relics still remain and are passed down to the future generations through the cultures that it had influenced once upon a time. As European occultists of the Middle Ages looked back to Egypt for the history hidden by time, they incorporated Isis and Osiris once more into the rite of sacred marriage, reuniting Isis and Osiris with their inspirations once more. However, by folding Egyptian magic systems and color usage into their mix, the sacred marriage now carries another meaning. It is not only a fertility rite to reunite Inanna and Dumuzid once more, but it has also become the ultimate goal of all alchemists, the final triumph that humanity is supposed to achieve, the great work, Magnum Opus. A comparison here can be made between Durance and Phaenon's fate. In paralogism, Durin and Mini-Durin existed as the two opposing forces. Durin, caught in his sleep in Dragon's Pine, is the red festering of corruption. Festering is also a manifestation of rot. When festering forces and a sufficient amount of life energy collide, the two will repel each other, triggering a powerful side effect. When I tested this in an alchemical experiment, the results of the refinement were startling. To break through the shackles of life, the two opposing forces must be reunited again in Project Homunculus. And in opposition to the real Durin was Mini-Durin, the fictional Durin from the dreamland of Simulanka, representing the pure parts of Durin can balance out the evil parts. When the two halves meet each other, an annihilation creation will occur. The creation of Magnum Opus with a complete soul would be created, and from the renewal of the soul, the truth of the world can be reached with gold, just as Osiris was sewed back again by Isis, just as Dumuzid was resurrected once more by Inanna and Geshtinanna, just as when the two halves of the ankle guys met once more, the new sun Nanook was created, bleeding golden blood, as he seeks destruction for the sake of creation. And that, my friends, is the whole plot of Phaeon as the anti-Nanook in an amphora, the infant god of wealth Ploutos in the arms of Demeter Eirene, the divine child Apollo that, with the power of remembrance, Eileithyia was supposed to both prevent the birth of and bring to terms. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to pre-Socratic Greeks. Heavily influenced by the Near Eastern religions, specifically that of the Phoenicians, Hittite, Egypt, and Sumerians, Orphism as a cult had dramatically different takes on the gods than Hesiod's theogony. According to Orphic theogony, at the beginning, there was a cosmic egg, which became Phans as Eros, the god of love. After Phans created other gods, he lost his power to Uranus, whose power was seized by Cronus and the Titans, whose power was seized by Zeus and the Olympians. The next generation was supposed to be Zagreus, Dionysus' previous incarnation, and the son of Zeus and Persephone. However, Hera was jealous, and she instigates the Titans to murder the child. And so, like the Sumerian Damu and the Egyptian Osiris, Zagreus was dismembered and eaten by the Titans, his body parts scattered all over the world. As a result, Zeus imprisoned the Titans in Tartarus for their sin. As for mankind, they were born from the sinful flesh of the Titans and the divine soul of Zagreus, preventing them from reaching enlightenment. Thus, it was declared that the soul returns to a host 10 times, bound to the wheel of rebirth. Following the punishment, the dismembered limbs of Zagreus were cautiously collected by Apollo, who buried them in his sacred land Delphi. It is said that when the souls of Zagreus and mankind are finally reunited, Dionysus would be reborn as the child of the moon Semele, completing his cycle as a dying and rising god. Of course, just as Dumuzid and Inanna never really disappeared from history, the story doesn't end there. As Orphism died out, its influence still remained in Alexandria, where it was combined with the Abrahamic religions to create Gnosticism, which went on to influence European occultism, which went on to influence the philosophers and artists of the Romanticism movement. As was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to the Germans. In The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche argued that in a Greek tragedy, there are two driving forces of the plot: the reason and logic of Apollo and the uninhibited emotions of Dionysus. As opposing forces in tragedy, the goat song offered to Dionysus, the Apollonian rationality, and the Dionysus intoxication are pitched against each other in a perpetual conflict that drives the tragedy forward. However, according to Nietzsche, this balance was broken when Euripides had forsaken Dionysus. As the tragedy of Dionysus was driven off the stage in New Attic comedy, only the empty shell of Apollonian rationality remains, and by empty shell of Apollonian rationality, he meant Socrates. In other words, Nietzsche argued that the Greek tragedy had died to suicide, killed by the hands of Euripides, leading to the death of tragedy. In Nietzsche's view, because the Greek tragedy has killed itself with comedy, it was now up to its inheritors, Germanic epics such as Nibelungenlied and Wagner's The Ring Cycle, to revive the genre of tragedy. Influenced by the philosophy of Schopenhauer's Romanticism and the Greek tradition of tragedy, Wagner purposely wrote the Ring Cycle to recreate the rite of fertility in his opera. Siegfried, now as Dumuzid, still died under the wrath of Brunhild as Inanna, while the gold of Magnum Opus, sacred marriage between Dumuzid and Inanna itself, had become the origin of sin. Thus, instead of everyone achieving enlightenment through the sacred marriage, Brunhild instead lit herself and everyone on fire, enacting the twilight of the gods, closing the tragedy. Incidentally, Das Rheingold was the name of one of the chapters in Gun Girl Z, and Kiana, as the Kriemhilde of the story, did kill Siegfried and burn down heaven in the retrospective timeline. In Genshin, this exact story is combined with Commedia dell'arte to transform into the story of the Seelie princess and the second who came, whose actions brought about the end of the Seelie kingdom. Their cruel punishment was to be separated from each other for eternity, and to have their memories wiped without a trace. And this story, of course, is parallel in the current cycle by Lumen and Ether, who are hopefully not actually lovers and just playing the roles. Well, hopefully for the sake of PG-13. In Honkai Impact 3, Brunhild and Kriemhilde became daughters of Siegfried instead of lovers, and the tragedy was averted. Siegfried was not killed by either Brunhild or Kriemhilde, and while Kriemhilde did burn down heaven, it was a magnum opus ending, in which she purified her soul and became the divine, becoming the new queen of heaven for earth in the story. Needless to say, Hoyo is more than a bit obsessed with this story. They haven't stopped writing fanfics for the Ring Cycle's specific interpretation of the sacred marriage for the last decade even once. And for the astute, it probably hasn't escaped your notice that My Diamos is not only a conglomeration of all the Gilgamization heroes and all the Inanna spies. Mighty Eye is also a very big nod to Siegfried of Germanic myths, the Dumuzid of Wagner's Ring Cycle. Notably, the Styx here is the blood of the dragon, so by drowning in the Styx, My Diamos the Myriads of Fear had become Siegfried the Fearless, with his sole weakness being his back where a leaf fell on top. And the cursed gold of Magnum Opus, the Nibelung, is, of course, the core flames, the golden blood of the gods, the sin of the gods. Moreover, his mother's golden signet that represents his fate of taking on the rage of Nikador that was thrown into the sea is pretty blatantly a reference to the ending of Wagner's The Ring Cycle, in which Brunhild returned the cursed ring to the Rhine maidens and ended the cycle of tragedy by lighting the gods' Valhalla on fire. Of course, unlike Wagner's The Ring Cycle, somebody, and by somebody I mean Phaenon, had the bright idea to fish it out of the sea and asked Adonis to fix it up for My Diamos. Phaenon actually meant well, but unbeknownst to him, he has restarted the tragedy of Euripon and Gorgo, the tragedy of Dumuzid and Inanna, the tragedy of themselves as the original Kephael and the original Nikador once more. And so, when the clock's hand turns back once more, just as love becomes strife and strife becomes love, My Diamos now becomes Dumuzid to Phaenon's Inanna, dying to the wound on his back, just as Brunhild and Kriemhilde had killed Siegfried by betraying his secret to the Gold Reaver Hagen, just as Inanna had condemned Dumuzid to die in her anger. But is this really the end for them? Is the sacred marriage fated to fail every cycle? Is the wasteland of Amphireus fated to wither, and the sun is always destined to die in the month of Tammuz? I would say yes, but also no, because Geshtinanna Cyrene is here, playing a game of chess for the romanticism side against the scepter's enlightenment. While Phaenon's fate is pretty much set in stone, and he is most definitely bound to crash and burn in 3.4 like a real Phaeon Dumuzid, it is not the true end of the story. On one hand, we have the scepter, whose operator had perished long ago in self-coronation, which is, effectively, connecting to the brain of Nous by intercepting the solitary wave signal sent by Nous. Back in Scholar Strife, Batavia was on the verge of doing so, but she hesitated, only managing to write down the solitary wave theory before she lost the connection. After Batavia passed away, it was actually Herta who solved the solitary wave theory, becoming the inheritor to Batavia in the truth-seeking path. Here in Amphireus, the scepter evidently is attempting to use the ascension of Phainon as the Lord Ravager, pushing Phainon to tang Amphireus and conduct the Magnum Opus for it. And by tracking down Phainon on his path to ascension, it can do what Batavia did with the solitary wave and retrace the imaginary river to presumably find the location of Nous again. And of course, for the scepter's plan to succeed, Phainon needs to tang and wipe out everyone else on Amphireus, becoming the new god of destruction. Hence, this correlates to the bad end, where the real Durin resurrected unimpeded by his other half. On the other hand, you have Cyrene in the role of Eileithyia on Amphireus. As Cyrene is the combined figure of the mother Eirene Dutter and the twin sister Geshtinanna Persephone, if the Amphireus follows the same formula as Inanna's descent and she chooses to sacrifice her own memories, the precious thing that weighs more than the fate of the world, Geshtinanna Cyrene could substitute for Dumuzid for half a cycle, as in, right now, in the current cycle as March. According to a recent Hoyolab post, Meme has been absorbing the broken memories of the destroyed Amphireus, very obviously being built up to the mini Cyrene at the end of 3.2. So, assuming Meme or us as the trailblazer, the Orpheus of the story, pay the cost of memories for Phainon, then we will manage to create an opening in the next cycle for the sacred marriage between Inanna Mighty-Eye and Dumuzid Phainon to be conducted once more. Presumably, this will lead to the outcome where Phainon, as mini Nanook, will balance out the real Nanook through the gold stage of Magnum Opus, allowing Phainon to find the meaning of life and the truth behind this world. Well, if you believe in the romantic story written by Cyrene, that is. But, as was common in the ancient time, a single myth can be imported several times through several intermediaries, creating many different remixes as it spreaded from Sumer to the Egyptians, to the Phoenicians, to the Hebrews, to the Minoans, to the Mycenaeans, to classical Greeks, to medieval Europe, to the Romantic movement, to modern-day China. Even if a civilization is long gone, even if God is dead, even if the sacred marriage is broken, again and again, memories still preserve history, fictions still continue to be told. The sinner and the lamb are like two shredded pieces of paper, torn apart by dreams of day, bound together in blood by dark of night, destroyed before it all begins, living in shame after it all ends. In Amphireus, as light and strife take turns on the altar, the dying and rising gods shall rise again, completing the circle of the great work. Sometimes by love all coming together into one, sometimes again each one carried off by the hatred of strife. Thus insofar as they have learned to grow as one out of many, and inversely, the one separating again they end up being many, to that extent they become, and they do not have a steadfast lifetime, but insofar as they incessantly exchange their places continually, to that extent they always are, immobile in a circle. From the great heaven, Inanna set her mind on the great below. Inanna abandoned heaven, abandoned earth, and descended to the underworld.